Okay, so this video is going to cover a little bit more about how to extend Jam.py with custom code. So I've got this little application here. You can see when I open up the application, it's got a nice little startup page. I've got some JavaScript running there, and enter the application, and you can see on the first page I've got some custom HTML, still showing a grid, and then here in a couple of these other pages, I just did a little bit to demonstrate here. I've got some applications built with other frameworks inserted as iframes in the application, because that's a very useful thing to be able to do. So there is a our Shiny application, but with an entirely different set of languages and tools, but hosted on the same server. And then this is a SQL page app. So in a previous video, you saw me integrate our Shiny, or not our Shiny, Jam.py apps into a SQL page application using iframes. Now we're doing the opposite, inserting a SQL page iframe. And the key here is that I'm customizing each of these Jam.py pages with custom HTML and custom JavaScript, sometimes just custom HTML. Okay, so let's take a look at this in our application builder. So at the same location and port, same domain and port, just with the builder.html. We get some of these client and server modules available, and also if we click on the task link over here, we can see that there is a link to the index.html and the project.css. So each of these are a single file for the entire project. So to begin working with customization for each of the pages, take a look at this index.html. This is where we load our CSS and JavaScript, just like you would in any regular HTML project. And then we have some things that are built into the application, and we have some of these templates. Some of these are defaults. And then I've added a few here, and these templates we can import into each of the tasks or each of the pages in the Jam.py application. So you can see here I've got a div named Shiny iframe view, and that has got some HTML, which we are going to place into the task where we want that template to appear. And so you can see I've got some buttons. I've got a table view in this one, which is how we insert the Jam.py table. And I've got some buttons put in the footer, which we're going to use to interact with the Jam.py grid. And then we have another div down here that has an iframe. And this is the application. So to insert an iframe, all we need to do is tell it the source, styling it a bit here, and giving it a little title. So we've got some other ones here. Default view. And you can see, for example, where I've got a Bootstrap grid here. And I've included a number of other HTML pieces, little tags that we can use in a typical application. Each one of those, importantly, has its own name, its own class name. Okay, so if we go back to our application builder, and for example, I have a couple catalogs here, and you can think of these journals and catalogs and details pages all as a page in the application that gets linked by the menu on top. And so what we did here for the SQL page app, I'm going to click on that, and I'm going to look in the client module. The client module here, very simply, all it does is when the view is created, creates a template variable, and it looks for that template class that we haven't defined in the index.html page, and it clones it, brings it into this page, and then it empties the form. So there's no longer a grid there or anything else that's typically inserted by Jam.py, and we insert that HTML template. So in this case, all that happens when we run that link, we click on our SQL page, is we just get the HTML. There is no grid, nothing else that Jam.py would normally insert into that view on that page. So you can think of this as a very simple little website builder, and we put all of our HTML into the index.html file in the form of templates, and then we import them as a template into the page. First, empty the view form, and then append that template. It's very simple, a couple lines of code, and you can put any HTML you want into the into any page on the site. So now let's take another one here. We're going to look at our favorite foods and shiny page. So we have a little grid on that page, and we look at our client module. What that does is it does the same thing we did before. We clear the page, we import this shiny iframe view template, and just to be clear, let's look for that, shiny iframe view. You can see that's a class in the templates section of the index.html page. So we take that class, which has all this HTML layout code, and we import it into over here into our favorite foods task on the in the Jam.py layout. And we append that template. Again, we empty the form, append the template, and now we're just checking to make sure that that is actually available. That's not essential, but can print a little error out to the console if the container isn't found, if that template isn't found. We'll do some initialization here, so we're going to set the table height to be 300, and we're going to create a table. So now we're going to display that table manually. I'm going to create some new buttons. So this is normally handled by the Jam.py framework automatically, but you can do all this manually here. So you can include anything from the framework that you want in these newly added pages. And so we're going to create a button and assign some JavaScript functionality to each of those buttons. So we insert a create, edit, and delete button and log some to the console. So if we run this and we press F12, let's open up our a couple other things going on there in our console. But if we look at this, you can see at the bottom, if I can get my screen recorder out of the way, there we go. So we have some other things we have to take care of here, but we have printed that to the console. A little messy, but you get the point. So now on this page, what we've got is the grid. We have created a grid. We've created some buttons which do their normal work, and we've inserted into the HTML an iframe. And of course, we could interact with that that iframe or interact with anything else on the page using standard HTML, CSS, JavaScript, Bootstrap, jQuery in our JavaScript for this page. So the standard way of doing this in Jam.py is to create a template class within the existing template section, give it a name, and then we go over, put whatever we want in that HTML, and go over into our JavaScript for each page. So you have a JavaScript module for each individual page in the application builder. So for each of these tasks, you have a JavaScript module. So the client module for the journals looks like this. The JavaScript for the favorite foods looks like that. And you have all these things open. You have some nice little IDE features like showing the functions that exist on the page, and you can always click on the tasks and the events to make sure you get the spellings right. A little bit of autocomplete there. And of course, for each module, we can also deal with the server code. So let's take a little bit more of a look here. And what I'm going to do here is open this text area page, and let's take a look at that in the app. So we have this little task. Term task in SQL page you can roughly equate to being a page in the application. So I'm going to let's take a look at this one right here. You can see what I've got going on here is got another grid. I've got a little text area that what I had to do here was collect all of the column 1 values from the grid, so you can see everything that's in column 1 is displayed down here. And if we add a new row to the end, you can see that's been added now to the grid, and of course we can edit this however we want. Okay, so also I've got a little button, which you saw in a previous application is very easy to add, or in a previous tutorial. And here this grid is showing and hiding the grid on the page. Of course, we could show and hide anything else on the page, including any custom HTML sections that we've added to the template. So let's take a quick look at that. Our text area here, I'm going to highlight it, click on the client module. Let's close some of these other things. Get rid of this. And so you can see we have a bunch of functions that are run when this event occurs. So we have all of these events built in. So when the view form is created, we create a function. It's called update text area. And we'll come back to this because this actually runs a server call, which we'll get to in a second. And it updates that text area. So that's going to actually update the little text area we add here. And then let's see, we also add some handlers for after a post is applied and after an apply event occurs. So we have all these. These again are the events that are built into Jampy. So when we do things with the grid, we can run functions. And then you've seen this in the previous tutorial. We add a button to the layout by creating a variable and then adding in our item, which is the current screen. We run this add view button, and it has the text toggle grid, and it's of type primary, so it's a dark color button. And then we have another function. When the toggle button is clicked, when that event happens, we run this code. And what that's going to do is run this code, which shows and hides. So if the grid's visible, it hides it, and it changes the text on the toggle button. And otherwise, if it's not visible, it shows the grid and changes the text on the toggle button. So that does this little bit here. So again, we're just writing normal JavaScript code with the help of any jQuery and Bootstrap and all of the little handlers that are built in. Running, so when events happen, we use those events to run code in our defined functions here. Now, what we're also doing on this page is adding this little text area. And so some JavaScript here that's filling this text area with values from the grid. And what I did here was I wrote a function called update text area, which we run right away when the form is loaded, and we also run whenever a post or an apply and trigger occurs, and whenever one of those events occurs. And you can see the definition of this function includes what you've seen before, a server call. So we're going to call from our server code for this page the function called get all column 1 values. And if we have an error from that, we're going to print an error to the console. Otherwise, we are going to apply on the form this class all the values that are found in that returned data set from the server function. Otherwise, we're going to put this text in there. Okay, so let's take a quick look on our text area page, this little text area simplest code page. Now, if we look at the server code, we've got this little bit of code here, basically the same as this. It's commented out, but what we do is we've got a get all column 1 values function defined, and we open the data grid on that page. That's the item. And then from this function, we go through each row in the item, in the data grid. And if there is a column 1 value in that row, then we return that. So this builds a list using this for loop and returns all of those column 1 values, which then again is applied to the text area. So hopefully that gives you a little bit more of an idea how this is, how all this can be put together using just standard Python on the back end, which has access, very importantly, to the grids. That's sort of like the ORM. That item is the grid data. So you can work with these values. When you work with the values on the front end, when you work with those grid values, you're dealing with the ones that are displayed on the screen. And when you work with the item on the back end, you're dealing with the entire data set. And of course, you can call any other Python code libraries on the back end, and on the front, you can call any other JavaScript code. You want to do some interesting graphics. And in fact, here I have one example here. When we start this page, let's take a look at the persons task. So we'll take a look at our persons HTML. So we'll go back up into our task. We'll open up, again, that is here, index.html. And let's see where this is. Okay, so we called this the journal view. So this is a template that we're going to include on a page. So we have all these templates that we've created that are custom HTML. And in this one, we have a class called custom header. And just have a little header text, a little bit of some paragraph text, a line break, and an image. And so that is what you see on the page. And then we have the table and some footers with buttons. Because what I've done here for this page, when we look at our persons.js, we have imported the journal view template, cloned it in, and I've cloned that into an empty page. So because I'm no longer using the Jam.py automatically included HTML and CSS, which includes the grid, we're going to have to insert those things again in here. But I can say I also added a class for styling. We have in there, in our task, we can look at the project CSS, and you can see that we've got some additional styling here. So for our journal view, we've changed the header. We can adjust the padding, and anything else we can adjust here are the coloring and margins and so on, text sizes and fonts. So that exists in a little file in our project directory called CSS, project.css. And all of these are available at the command line. You can edit this in Nano or Micro or Vim or anything else that any other editor if you're working on your server. But this framework gives us the access to all these files directly in the editor, which saves us lots and lots of round-trip editing on the server. We can just edit here right in the builder. Let's take a look at that index again. We've got a form footer. And again, this was called journal view. So let's go back into our persons JavaScript. So to be clear, this is just another page, another task added to the task layout here. This one's called persons. We open up the client module, and that's where we have the JavaScript that empties the current form and appends that journal template, the HTML, and then runs all this other JavaScript that we want. Cool. So setting the height, adjusting it, and so on. And we add again a new button, and so on. Assign events to the event handlers, or assign assign handlers to the buttons for events, and then do a little bit of logging in the console when we're done. Okay, so that's how we handle the HTML. And again, all that HTML is in our index.html file. And again, where you get that is by clicking on task for that single file that's available on the task on index.html. Your CSS is available here on the project.css, and then the JavaScript for each page, for each task, is available by clicking on each of those tasks and then clicking on the client module or the server module. Okay, so we have no Python for this particular task called HTML landing. Okay. So a lot more JavaScript here, which I'll paste as a function. But probably the biggest thing to see is that for this one, if I go back to my index.html file, let's look for that. So we can see we've created this journal view, and that's in a class called custom header. And then let's see where else. The other thing I did here was I put a bunch of JavaScript into this page that runs. So on our that particular page, I first added this little bit down here. I'll find it. Where are we here? I have to look for where I put this. Find our index.html page. And let's take a look at it. Okay, so here we go. So for this, I have a script section, just like you normally import all your scripts. So I have a script section here, and when the document is done loading, I ran a little bit of JavaScript, hid the landing page, and then showed this container, and then ran this JavaScript. So when the page is loaded, this is how I got the little startup page. Ran this script here, and then you can see basically we run this nice little JavaScript that goes through and does some animation, exploding these lines and moving particles around on screen, and it runs that function that we've created. So if we take a look at this, when the page is loaded, the first thing you get, when the application is loaded, the first thing you get is it hides our starting page and runs this bit of JavaScript. So hopefully that gives you a good idea about how to actually build out these applications. And so you still get all of the really fantastically useful CRUD functionality built in, but it doesn't limit you at all to working with working with these pages and including any custom HTML, CSS, JavaScript that you want to include on any of the pages. So if you want to add a new page, you just add a new task, and on that page you open up the client module, run any JavaScript you want, which can include importing templates from your index.html page. And then sky's the limit from that. You can do any JavaScript you want, and of course you have access to the database using that that item all the values of the grid, and you also have access to the data in the grid using server module. And of course, you can hide the grid or show the grid as you need, deal with whatever you need from the database entirely with just some stock Python or some stock JavaScript that can include importing libraries anywhere. So hopefully that opens up a little bit about how you can work with the system to do the things you normally do. I'm going to, in the next video, show you how you can just interact with all of these built-in event handlers and everything else that you can do with jQuery and with Bootstrap and with everything else that's built in the framework, just using the developer tools. So you can see how you have an extended IDE functionality just using F12 without ever having to use leave the browser and leave this IDE. And maybe we'll take a look next time also about how these files are stored on the server, so that it makes sense how your file structure works and where everything is on your server. Very simple interface, but boy is it powerful. You can do a lot with this. Okay, that's enough for this time, and I'll come back and we'll do some more fun stuff next time.